Yo, what's good, party people? This is Zach Columber, and in today's video, we're going to talk about thought loops. We're going to talk about what they are, why they happen, what to do about them in the short term, and what to do about them in the long term. So let's jump right into it. And before we do that, please hit subscribe if you haven't already, so I can keep you updated with the new videos. All right, so what is a thought loop? Now, this isn't a formal definition, but I think this is a definition that'd be the most helpful to you as the person watching this and not some academic. So, a thought loop in my mind is something where you have a certain pattern of thoughts that are usually associated with anxiety or some other painful emotion. And it just keeps repeating and repeating, and it's painful, and you want it to go away, but you can't. And what's particularly vicious about these thought loops is that often the more energy you try to use to get these away or to push them away or to suppress them, it's really only strengthening the thought loop. It's almost like one of those Chinese finger traps where if you try to the harder you try to pull, the more tightly you get wrapped up in it. And that's what these thought loops are like. So, for example, just to be like vulnerable and show you guys some thought loops I've had. Okay, so this pandemic was really tough, and there was definitely months that were extremely challenging. And during this time, I'd think thoughts like there'd be thought loops of like, oh, like people have abandoned me, or I'm gonna run out of money. And these are the kind of things that would just like keep me up at night, right? Because obviously, a lot of these come up right before you're about to sleep. That's when all these sneaky anxieties come up. And I think the reason for this is because when you're going to sleep, you kind of have to let go. And let's delve into why the thought loops happen. And I want to give you kind of a view of how I believe that human psychology works in a very practical way. So, one school of psychology or psychotherapy is called internal family systems. And the basic idea behind this is that all of us have many different parts to ourselves, right? So what you would call yourself is, in one sense, an illusion, and that's a whole nother thing. But in another sense, there are all these different aspects to yourself, and they're basically different characters within you. So the stereotypical one is like the inner child, and that's been made fun of a lot. But what you're basically doing is assigning, you have all these different drives and different parts of your mind, right? You have your prefrontal, your kind of mammal brain, and then you kind of have your lizard brain. And there's many different parts to these brains, these parts of your brain. And so when you think of yourself as one unified thing, that is often not the case. And a lot of times when we have these thought loops, it's because one of those parts of ourself is just in pain, and it's like crying out for help, essentially. Now, I'm not saying that's the only reason you could have thought loops, but at least in my experience, this has often been the case. There's a part of me that is worried, and it doesn't feel like it's being listened to, and so it just keeps shouting out, shouting out. Some examples of other characters in your internal repertoire might be something like a taskmaster, that part of yourself that like really whips you in the shape and makes you do stuff, but maybe you don't have a positive relationship with that part of yourself. For me, there's a part of me that's like, like the meditator Zach, this wise Zach who I'm trying to strengthen and cultivate. There's the, I guess, like adult Zach who's had to make a lot of hard decisions and figure out all the things that come along with being in this world. There's a lot of characters, and more are popping up each day as I go through therapy using this process. But this is not something new. I've used this since back in college, so it's like 7 or 8 years now. And what's useful about this frame of psychology is that it gives you a very practical way to engage with your emotions. And we'll get into this. So let's get into the practicalities here. What do you do in the short term, like tonight or this second? And what do you do in the long term to deal with these thought loops in a productive way? So in the short term, I think the absolute best thing you could do, assuming it's not like way too late for this, Let's say you're getting really anxious more in the middle of the day. And this is also something you can incorporate into your routines for the long term, and that's doing interval training. There's no other form of training that I've found that really gets out those anxiety demons, if you want to call it that, like interval training. And I think this is because, when you're anxious and you have this thought loop that's continuing over and over, it's like there's a part of you that is activated, right? There's a part that's activating your fight or flight system. And the thing about the fight or flight system is that if you are running and you do a bunch of like sprints, for example, or do something else that gets your heart rate up and makes your system, feel like, hey, we're doing some activity here, you can siphon off a lot of energy. You can bleed it off because it's there for a reason. Your brain thinks you're in danger. It's trying to protect you. And so it's like, hey, we should go and run or fight, or, if you're really scared, you might just freeze up. Now, that obviously isn't possible to do all the time, especially if it's late at night. So some other stuff we have here. Practically speaking, what's helped me out the most is a combination of things. First, you want to do some stretching and like some foam rolling. Get some tennis balls and just like roll on them. Massage your upper traps. Massage your chest muscles, like your pecs, pec major, pec minor. You can put two tennis balls together and kind of roll on them along your upper back. You can use a foam roller on your legs. You can do massage with your hands. There's a really good book called the Trigger Point Therapy Workbook that will give you very specific guidance here. But the rule of thumb is, go to the threshold of uncomfort or discomfort and try not to go too far. So if you're like really pressing, you're like, don't push harder. Just kind of hang out there. And so that just helps to kind of like, touch is so important for us for relaxing, and it's good for us. And this you're just kind of you're just touching yourself. I mean, with the use of some tools. But also it's, we're not really sure why foam rolling works. People have said like, oh, you're breaking up the fascia, but that doesn't appear to be true. The fascia is like this kind of lining of all your muscles that connects everything. Usually you're just not using enough force to do something like that, unless you're scar tissue and a physical therapist going really hard in there. Most of the time, I think it's just your nervous system that's being activated. Your nervous system is being chilled out. It's being kind of reminded of where all your different body parts are. Because so much of us like don't live in our bodies. We have no awareness being sent to our body. So this is kind of like bring about awareness. It's self-touch, and it's also just chilling out your nervous system. And the general rule here is you just want to be really chill. So don't be like aggressive with your stretching. This is something I fuck up with a lot. I'll get like really into it, and then I'll start like working out a little bit. And the thing is, if it's late at night, you don't want to go too intense. You want to have like a chill vibe here. But if it's in the middle of the day, do whatever the fuck you want, right? All right, then we're going on to the next step, which is do a loving kindness meditation. So literally you can just engage with whatever thought loop is repeating, and you can say something like, I love you. I'm here for you. You're safe. It's all going to be okay. And as you repeat these phrases, or whatever phrases are useful for you, whatever phrases resonate with you on an emotional level, then you'll find that you're gradually going to calm down. Now, obviously, the more that you've practiced loving kindness meditation, the easier this will be. And you may want to use a guided meditation. I have plenty on my channel to help you out here. But basically, you're just engaging with this part of yourself and you're giving it love. And it's a really special thing. And I found that I've done all the other tips, but if I don't do this one, I often can't go to sleep. So this is really important. Now let's just get into some very nitty gritty stuff. If you've done this and you're still just like your thoughts are racing, you're anxious, and it's a daytime, do that interval training workout. But if it's after that and you've done all the other stuff, or it's nighttime and you've done all the other stuff, then what you should do is eat a meal with a lot of carbs in it. Now, you don't want to go too far here because you can definitely put on weight with this strategy if you use it too much. But at least in the short term, if you eat like a bunch of rice or something, you're going to make yourself sleepy. And you're also going to give your body a signal. It's like, hey, there's food here. You're safe. We're not in any danger. Your body has two kind of main modes. And we're not getting into like brain waves and like default mode and theta waves and delta. This is, broader than that. Broadly speaking, you have fight or flight and you have rest and digest. And so when you're eating food, you're priming yourself to be in that rest and digest mode. And this is the last thing, and this is something that, I wouldn't recommend all the time, but if it's in a pinch and you got to do it, you could do melatonin or something like that. I find that melatonin fucks with me, but you should experiment with a low dose, maybe 2.5 milligrams. What I find is the best for me is just like having a beer, which I'm not doing now because my stomach's fucked up, but mainly having some weed. Like if you don't smoke weed, don't go out and start because I said it. But especially if you have like a nice heavy indica and you don't have a super high tolerance, I find that can really chill you out and help you get to sleep. And again, you can abuse this. Like I've been smoking way too much weed this past year during the pandemic, and now I'm making efforts to cut down and really only smoke at night when I feel like I need that relaxation. But this is just something that, if you do all these things, it's kind of hard not for it to help. And the last two, these are kind of more insomnia ones. Eat some food, do all the stuff I said, but also maybe masturbate and take a hot shower. Just, more things to kind of chill you out. These are more those creature comforts. Long term is where the real juice, the real gold is, because in the short term, a lot of these strategies are just not addressing the root of the problem. The loving kindness is the most root addressing short-term solution, but in the long term, you got to go deeper. So the number one thing that I would recommend is doing some therapy. I'm doing a second round of therapy now. I did about 1.5 years of it back in college, and I'm just finding that's incredibly useful. You have this trained, empathetic expert whose only job is to listen to you and help you work through these problems. And I found that I had a lot of resistance to getting into into therapy, especially since I've already done it. And it can be hard to find somebody. I'll have to make a video about how I found someone and like the best place to do it. And it's definitely expensive. So I'm not discounting these obstacles. But the reality is, with a lot of things in life, you get what you pay for. And I'm spending right now like $120 a session weekly, which is fucking expensive. But I'm just seeing so many benefits to my mental health. And I saw an incredible amount of benefits the last time I did it. So that's my number one thing. I know it's not sexy. Everybody talks about it. And I wouldn't recommend the Headspace or whatever. No, that's a meditation app. I wouldn't recommend just doing therapy via texting. I know there's some of those like BetterHelp that are out there now. I haven't tried those. I kind of think it's bullshit. I think you really need to have at least a Skype call with a video to be able to have a good therapy session. Like a phone call is okay, but texting, there's just not enough emotional content being transmitted there. So I wouldn't recommend that. Right now I'm doing Zoom sessions and it's working great. Then the next part here is really, and then again, this is what's worked the best for me, is having a regular meditation practice. Because the thing with our thoughts is that the more we engage with these thoughts and the more these patterns continue, we just get trapped deeper and deeper in this very heavy, like head-centric way of living where you're disconnected from your body, you're kind of disconnected from your emotions, and you're just, in your head all the time. And there's this saying that the mind makes an excellent servant, but a terrible master. And this is very, very true. Because you're not your mind, you're not your thoughts. And what meditation does is it helps you realize that, not in an intellectual way, but on a very ground level, in your bones, sort of visceral way. Which means that, you'll see the beginning of that thought loop pop up, and you'll just be like, hey, there's that thought loop. I've had that one before. Like, hey, how are you doing? You start to recognize these things as events that are occurring and not as part of your identity. It's something that's happening to you. It's not necessarily you. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and end this up. Again, like a regular, meditation and therapy, but also taking care of yourself physically is, of course, going to be good for this. But I think those are the main ones. If you like this video, go ahead and, again, subscribe, hit the like button, and hit me up in the comments if you have any questions. Pretty soon, I'm going to put a link to a anonymous comment form so that whatever, questions you have, you can submit without anybody seeing them, and I'll never share that. I will answer the questions, but I'll never share who they're coming from. And like I said, it'll be anonymous. So definitely look out for that, and I appreciate your time. Until next time.